All right, I think we can get started now. We have 14 participants now. Hello everyone. My name is Crimin Infante. I am the Food Pantry Coordinator at Nazareth Housing, and here with me is my coworker Sander. Today we have Claudia Codrington, who will be talking to us about how to avoid or manage diabetes. Also later today will be joining us Literacy Inc. They will be talking to us about their programming and their upcoming events. Before I give the space to Claudia, I want to introduce Edgar, who is a representative from EGNA. So Edgar, the floor is yours at this moment.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to thank you for coming out. I hope you enjoy the presentation. Claudia is a nutritionist who has so much information to provide and that benefits all of us, especially in this day and age. Should I say this in Spanish too, Kimberly?
Yeah, that's good.
Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por juntarse con nosotros esta tarde. Gracias a Crimil, gracias a Nazareth por invitarnos a nosotros. Claudia es una nutricionista que va a compartir una información muy significante, muy impactante y espero que ustedes beneficien. Muchas gracias.
So, Claudia, now the floor is all yours.
Okay, good afternoon to all. As you just heard, my name is Claudia Codrington, and I'm a registered dietitian, having worked in the field of nutrition for many years. Diabetes is always a topic I like to discuss because members of my family have diabetes. I have a brother who had type 1, which means he was born, they say from like 5 years old, he had diabetes. Being able to control it, you can live many years with very minimum of other illnesses, but you got to understand the basic of diabetes and the foods that you eat that can raise the blood sugar and what you can do to stabilize the blood sugar. So before I go into diabetes, I would like to start with pre-diabetes. And the reason I'm doing this, there may be some people listening or someone you know isn't yet fully diabetic. But if at pre-diabetes, you know what's going on, chances are you can start to make the changes which can prevent you from going into full-blown diabetes. Pre-diabetes means that your blood sugar level is higher than normal, but it's not yet that high where we can say, oh, you are a diabetic. If you can change it at that point and start doing the correcting, the only people who may have difficulties controlling their blood sugar is if they were born with it, like type 1. That's like the type my younger brother had. Type 1, from a kid, you have it. But if you are type 1, they learn their diet so well that they could live for many years just knowing how to control it. And adults, we should learn the same. So we ask, who is at risk for diabetes? And it starts with pre-diabetes. Anyone over the age of 45. If you are overweight, if you have a parent or a sibling who had diabetes, if during pregnancy you had gestational diabetes, chances are as you get older, if you're not taking care of it, it could become full-blown diabetes. If you're not physically active, at least 2 to 3 times a week. The question now is, can it be prevented? Yes. Lifestyle changes, including modest weight loss if you're overweight, good nutrition and regular exercise can prevent pre-diabetes from becoming into a full-blown diabetic. And so when that happens, the research is now showing that these changes can prevent or even delay type 2 diabetes because over half of the patients with pre-diabetes, they are able to manage their blood sugars, and sometimes it doesn't go into full-blown diabetes. The thing with diabetes is this. It's what happens when you don't take care of it. Many times blindness, people lose their eyesight. It's because of uncontrolled blood sugar for many years. It's because also you see with loss of limbs, they can lose a leg and all of that, poor circulation because of diabetes, heart disease, all of these illnesses are really, if you're diabetic and it's not controlled, it could make these situations worse. So if the doctor is already saying your blood sugar is showing signs of increasing, you're not full-blown diabetic, you may be pre-diabetic. This is what you can do. The first thing, if you're a very sedentary person, it means if you sit a lot and you don't exercise, just try to move more. Take a little walk after dinner. Just walking, what you are doing, you're burning some of the sugar in your body because the bottom line is glucose. You're, lowering that glucose. Eat high quality protein foods. Cut down on the starchy foods and increase your protein foods. You will not get overboard on the protein now, but adequate enough that you don't have to increase the breads and the potatoes and the high starches. Water. Water is the way to go. Cut out all these juices. Cut out sodas, all the sugary drinks. If you do these things, you could prevent the full-blown diabetes from becoming part of your daily life. Just say no to extra servings. Be mindful of your portion sizes. Don't have excessive portions. If you're exercising a lot, in that way you could have a little extra, but if you're not, then you're going to have to watch your portion sizes. So that's one of the things with diabetes. The other thing is the food that you eat is broken down and is converted into energy for your body. That's how we get energy, is from the foods that we eat. Now, our body uses glucose for energy. That's why we call it blood glucose. You're checking the sugar in your blood. It's really the glucose. And it's just like a car. It uses gasoline. That's our bodies. So to use glucose for energy, it must first get into your body cells. This is what is happening. When you test your blood sugar, that is the blood that is in the body, but it's not actually into your cells. And that is how we pick up there is sugar circulating. It's not going into your cells. It's supposed to go into the cells. It's in your blood moving around. That's not healthy. We don't want that. So it needs, and what it needs to do that is a hormone which we call insulin. So you always hear diabetics, especially type 1. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 means they're insulin dependent. They must take the insulin so that that food that you eat, when it's broken down, could go into your cells instead of circulating in your blood. And so when that is not happening, and every time your sugar is tested, you see all that sugar circulating in your blood, we know something is happening. So the major nutrients that are used for energy are the starchy foods and the carbohydrates and fats. It's not the protein. You can have your meat, your chicken, fish. That doesn't affect blood sugar. What affects blood sugar is the breads, the potatoes, the sweets, the soft drinks, excessive juices. That's what affects blood sugar. The thing about it, if you are diabetic, you have to watch fruit juices. That is glucose right there. That's pure sugar. And so we say for a diabetic, you should have 4 ounces of juice. But this is what happens with diabetics. The more fiber in your body, the fiber prevents that sugar from going into your cells. So if you have a choice of having 4 ounces of orange juice or a fresh orange as a diabetic, a small orange, your best bet is to eat the orange and drink water. When you eat the orange, you get fiber, all that, this little pulp and so around. When you drink the juice, it's processed. You get no fiber there. All you get is 15 grams of carbohydrate, which is all going direct into your cells and cause your blood sugars to rise. So that's why we say the major nutrients that are used for energy are carbohydrates and fats, and these starches, as we are called, and all the sweets are the main sources of glucose in the body. The fat acts as a storage also, but we don't want all that sugar to go into the body, especially if you don't have adequate amount of insulin. Your body is not producing the insulin. That's why we call that illness insulin dependent. It's two types of diabetes. One is called IDDM, which is insulin dependent diabetes. And the other one is IN, independent. Your body can function, because you still have a little insulin that can work. The type ones, they have their insulin is shot. So they got to either take a shot of insulin when they eat or watch what they eat very, very carefully. So normally, after eating a meal, your blood sugar rises and your body responds to the increase of insulin that is released. That's the normal way with all of us. We eat, our insulin is released, insulin takes that sugar into the cells. Now you're diabetic. Your body is not producing the insulin as you should. So what happens? It cannot get the sugar from the foods that you eat that's broken down. It's circulating, as I said, in the blood. It's not going into the cells to give you energy. And where it should be, the next thing, your blood sugar is high. So, and then what happens, you can have an idea if your blood sugar is high. The level of the blood sugar, as it rises higher and higher, it eventually spills into your urine. You find you go to the bathroom more frequently, you're urinating more frequently. It's because all that sugar is circulating there in the urine. So we got to be careful. If you know it runs in your family, and also if you were diagnosed with it, it is not something to fool around with, because it's the things that happens when you're diabetic. As I said before, eyesight. A lot of people who have lost their eyesight, it's because of uncontrolled diabetes. Gestational diabetes, women who, are pregnant and diabetic, you have a problem here, and sometimes passes on to the fetus. So we know in diabetes, it's all about the foods that you eat. It's not the meats. The meats do not bother your blood sugar. The meats could bother your cholesterol. If you have excessive amounts of meat, it could affect the cholesterol in your blood. But in terms of the diabetes, it's the breads, the potatoes, the rice, even milk. Milk has some carbohydrate in there. Like you have 8 ounces of milk, you're going to get 8 grams of protein, you get 12 grams of carbohydrate or starches, and maybe another 10 grams of fat. So even with that, but we work that in the diet. It doesn't mean you have to stay away from everything. It's just the amount of foods that's going to break down into sugar. You need your milk for your calcium and other stuff, but at the same time, you don't want to have excessive amounts of sweets like cakes and cookies. Again, it's not that you cannot. We don't want to make the diet in such a way that, you become frustrated and then you overeat. Everything has to work within. Most times the doctors would say you're on a 1800 calorie diet. To me, that's a diet that most of us can follow quite easily. The only thing with a diabetic, they are not supposed to use foods that are high in sugar. Did someone ask something? Oh, okay. Another thing you may be told when you're diabetic, the doctors may say that your A1C, it's called hemoglobin A1C. That tells us how amount of sugar you have in the body, your blood sugar level, and how long it's in there. That you don't want your A1C to be high at all. You want your A1C to be no more than like 6, 7 maximum. When it starts getting higher, you're going to have to put you on medication or sometimes insulin. All you have to do to bring down that A1C, limit sweets. We are still not saying cut it out, because if you're someone who exercises vigorously, it means you're going to burn some of that sugar. But if you sit down and you're not walking, you're not exercising, then that sugar is just going to go into the cells and, wreak havoc. Be careful of how many grams of carbohydrate you eat. Eat high fiber foods. A simple thing, breads. A lot of people avoid bread because they know the bread is going to send up my sugar. It's not that you cannot have bread. We need some carbohydrate. Without carbohydrate, our brains cannot function. It's just that we are having too much of it, especially if you're diabetic. Very easy. Instead of white bread, use the whole grain bread, the high fiber bread. The more fiber you have in your body and in the products that you eat, it will be able to help you to maintain your blood sugar. And this is what happens. Fiber has its job to do in the body. If you eat the slice, a simple way I like to show it, you eat a slice of white bread, it has 15 grams of carbohydrate. You look on the label, it's going to say that you eat it, everything breaks down into starches. Everything breaks down into sugar. Had you eaten a slice of whole grain bread with 5 grams of fiber, you subtract 5 from the 15, only 10 grams is broken down into sugar as a diabetic. Because you must have some carbohydrate. The brain needs carbohydrates. You need carbohydrates to move around. So we can't put patients on 0 carbohydrates if you're diabetic. You're allowed. When I talk about carbohydrates, I mean the breads and the starches and the potatoes and the rice and the pasta. So an easy way, use brown rice instead of the white rice if you're diabetic. You want more fiber. Fiber is going to pull, the soluble fiber is going to pull some of that sugar out of the system. It's not going to break down into glucose. You want to eat breads, you use the whole grain breads. Always choose the high fiber choices, and that's going to help. We like you to cut down on fat and alcohol, because alcohol is a form of sugar. It's going to break down into glucose that could send up. The term is glucose. That is why we say we are checking your blood glucose. Instead of using the term sugar, it's glucose. Exercise is something we advocate because exercise tends to lower the amount of blood sugar you have in the blood. It also improves your body's ability to use insulin. Sometimes what is happening, we have 2 types. You have type 1, which is insulin dependent, and type 2, which is independent. Type 1, they must take insulin. Type 2, you don't have to take insulin. You could control it with diet and exercise and whatever medication your doctor is giving you. The thing with diabetes is it likes company. Once you're diabetic, you got to watch your cholesterol and the heart. So you got to make sure you have, your cholesterol is good also, because you don't want, the problem with heart disease and stroke. They tend to work together. Diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. So you got to keep your heart strong. So that's the other thing with diabetes. Other thing is we want you to have a variety of foods from all the food groups. Your vegetables, you can have that. Your fruits, it's not that you can't eat fruits. Many times I hear diabetics say that, they can't eat fruits. It's going to turn sugar. It's going to turn glucose, it's true, but so does bread and potatoes. They all going to, we need some glucose. Our bodies cannot function without it. It's just when you are diabetic, especially when the doctor tells us put the patient on a 1,500 calorie diet, we have to watch the amount of glucose at each meal. And it's good to instead of staying very long to eat and wait until the blood sugar drops, then you start to feel dizzy, lightheaded, and we call that hypoglycemia. We don't like that at all. That's not good because you can pass out. I always like to make sure the patients know what can happen when their blood sugar is very low and when their blood sugar is very high. When the blood sugar is low, this is what happens. It causes, low blood sugar causes hypoglycemia. Sometimes certain medications, if you're taking your medications and you're not eating adequate amount of carbohydrate foods, or you are skipping a meal, staying too long to eat. That's the thing with diabetics. They cannot stay too long to eat because the blood sugar starts to dip and you can get dizzy and pass out. If you are taking insulin and you take too much of the insulin, or you're not eating adequate amount for the insulin that you're supposed to take, this can happen to you. The blood sugar can drop too low. You get shaky. You start to sweat. You can get dizzy. Your behavior starts to change, and or some people feel very hungry. You feel weak, tired, complaining of headaches. You're very nervous, upset. All these are signs that the blood sugar is low. Hypoglycemia. It's not a good thing. I've seen people, out even on the subway, passed out with hypoglycemia. The blood sugar was too low. The other one is if the blood sugar is too high. If your blood sugar is high, sometimes what happens if the patient is on insulin, it's probably they didn't take their insulin. If you're not yet on insulin, you probably ate more than you're supposed to eat, especially foods that break down into sugar, like the breads and the potatoes and the pastas and things like that. Meat doesn't affect blood sugar. But the thing is, we don't want you eating excessive amounts of meat because you're going to send up your cholesterol. And all of these things are not good for the heart. So you're not active. And so what happened? You start to feel sick, your blood sugar is high. The first sign can tell you that you're thirsty. If you're diabetic and you start feeling thirsty all the time, your blood sugar is high. If you find you're going in the bathroom frequently to pass urine, that is a sign that your blood sugar is high. If you're always hungry, something to watch, or sleepy, If the vision starts to get blurry, that's really bad. But by then we know definitely that blood sugar is very high. Now, if you know you are diabetic, and what is happening is that you have an injury or you get an infection and it's staying very long to heal, that is telling us that the blood sugar is high and you're not controlling it. So the reason we watch diabetes, a lot of things can happen. Simple thing as a stroke in the brain. That is many times caused by uncontrolled diabetes. The sugar is high for a long time. Eventually you get a brain stroke. Retinopathy. Retina, it means the eye. You get these eye diseases. A lot of people, again, who've lost their vision, as I said before, it's because of uncontrolled diabetes. Heart attacks, many times. We check the patients and we see sometimes their blood sugars were uncontrolled for a long time. But one that is we have a lot of cases with that is the kidneys. We call it kidney nephropathy. Many people on dialysis, it's because of uncontrolled blood sugar for many years. They didn't control their blood sugar. They kept eating, foods that breaks down into glucose, which is sugar. And because of that, the kidneys just can't handle it anymore. And so they have to go on dialysis. They are not able to dialyze their foods. They have to go to be dialyzed. As I said, we call it peripheral artery disease. What happens? Pains in the legs. You see people lost their legs over the time because blood flow, it's not flowing properly because of uncontrolled. The nerves become damaged, neuropathy in the fingers and the toes. That's because of uncontrolled blood sugar. So it's very important that you check your blood sugar and know your levels. One of the reasons I started with pre-diabetes is because recent studies are showing we have hundreds of thousands of new cases of pre-diabetes throughout the country now. And that is what we are trying to, if these people can control it and don't become full diabetics, that's really what the government wants, because it's very expensive as they look when you become diabetic and all these other illnesses that comes up. So you got to make a plan. Keep track of your blood sugar, but also your blood pressure and cholesterol. The three of them tends to work together. So you're diabetic, you're not controlling the blood sugar. Keep checking on your heart, your cholesterol, and your blood pressure. You want to make sure, at least if these two things are great, then at least you only have to control the blood sugar. Take your diabetes medication as directed. Many patients we find over the years, once they feel good, they skip their blood sugar medication. That's not good. You have to take it all the time because it's regulating in the system. It works with the amount of food that breaks down into glucose. You need those medications. If you smoke, ask for help to quit because smoking is not good. If you're diabetic and you keep smoking for many years, we don't recommend it because after a while you can have problems with the heart and again with blood flow. Get to and stay at a healthy weight. If you're overweight and most of your weight is in your abdominal area, that is not good for eat. Now we may say diabetes, we got to watch sugar. But when you're diabetic, there is a sort of relationship with the heart. So we try to look out for that right away. And immediately we say cut foods low in salt. Cut foods low in saturated fats. Saturated fats are fats that come from animal sources, like the fats on meat, like any fat that's solid at room temperature, that's a saturated fat. That's the type of fat that clogs up your arteries. Now, when you are diabetic, you don't want anything clogging up your veins and arteries. That's not good. Cut out all the trans fats. That is why the government cut out trans fats a couple of years ago. They stopped most of the foods. I think in the last 3 or 4 years, most of the foods we should not add trans fats. That was very bad for diabetics and patients on heart with heart problems. So that is very important. You need before a meal. If you know you're diabetic, you should check it. It should be 70 to 120, 130 maximum, but 70 to 120 before a meal, that's good. After a meal, you check it again, and if it's less than 180, that's good. That test that we say you should get at least once or twice a year, the HbA1c, hemoglobin A1c, you want your doctor to say it's under 7, even 6, 5, under 7, that's excellent. That means you are controlling your blood sugar. And that's one of the things that you want. Now, one of the questions we hear all the time, well, fruits, when you eat fruits, it turns into sugar. But remember, on a diabetic diet, we want you to eat healthy. And eating fruits are healthy. Most diabetic diets, if we put you on 1,800 calories, you can have 3 fruits a day. But it's not 3 fruits at the same time. You have one in the morning, one like midday, and one in the afternoon. You don't want, because the fruits are going to break down into glucose, which is sugar, goes into the cells, increases your blood sugar. You don't want that. But we want you to have all the benefits of eating healthy. And you need fruits. You need the fiber in fruits. You need the vitamin C from fruits. You need that. So fruits, vegetables, we want you to use all the healthy vegetables. There are some vegetables that has a little more starch or sugar than others, but all the green leafy vegetables, the carrots, the kale, yellow vegetables, very healthy, no problem. They don't break down into very much starch. Vegetables which may break down into starch, maybe if you're looking at something like a potato, a sweet potato, or like a pumpkin, they may have a little more starch than the green leafy vegetables. But it's not a problem. We want you to have vegetables. Don't stay away from the vegetables. Another thing is healthy oils. Although you are looking at a diabetic diet, we want you to choose healthy oils like the olive oil, the avocado oils. We want you to use that because there's a relationship with diabetes and the heart, so you're protecting your heart. Use a lot of spices, some herbs and spices to flavor your foods so you don't have to use excessive salt. Fluids, except you're retaining fluids and your body swelling up, that's the only time we will restrict your fluid to 4 to 5 cups a day. Other than that, you can have, because the more water you're able to take in, you're going to reduce the the sugar level too. Many times, you know, people check their blood sugars and it's high. Sometimes they're dehydrated. They are not drinking adequate amount of sugar, of water. And the excess sugar in their bodies, that's what we are really testing. They need to watch that. So again, the diabetic diet is a very simple diet. It's the way, if we all eat that way, it's going to be healthy. You have in the morning, you can have your bread, you got to limit it to know, and you can interchange foods. You get up today, like, I don't want to have bread, but I want to have some starch. You can have cereal. But if you're going to have like a big cup, like more than 8 or 10 ounces of cereal and 2 slices of bread, that's not good. You choose which one, or you take half a cup of cereal and 1 slice of bread, because they all will break down into starches. So you see, the diet, you could really, once you understand it, you could make the different choices with foods that you like and fit it in. The only thing is to make sure it has you eat more whole grains. Now, the question is, how often should you have your blood glucose checked, your blood sugar checked? If you are diabetic, it's always good to check it before your meals or sometimes after the meals. At bedtime, if you're pre-diabetic, that you're not yet diabetic, you don't have to check it that frequently, but you should check it at least once a week and see if it's remaining stable or if it's getting higher, so you could let your doctor know. Talk to your healthcare doctor, whoever you're working, about your blood sugar levels. Always ask for an A1C, but now you don't have to ask. The doctors, once they observe it, they will check your A1C, because that tells us what is going on in your body over a 3-month period. So if you say, I'm fine, I'm okay, but we check and that A1C is high, we know maybe the day you came for the test, it tested, okay, it was between the range where it should be. But prior to that, you were not good. You were probably eating a lot of things you shouldn't, because the HbA1c would tell us that if it's high. So that's another way. Check your own blood sugar as often as possible if you could, or when you go, ask your healthcare team to always check your blood sugar. If you are not type 1, the thing with type 1 is their body isn't making any insulin at all, so they must take it. Type 2 is the one we are more concerned, because, I'll tell you about type 1. Many times it starts, the kids are young and they become diabetic. They know their diets, they know their bodies, they have been working with it for a long time. Where we have problem is as people become older and they're diagnosed with high blood sugar, that is the group of people where we have the most problem trying to get them to control it, because they want to eat anything. And it's not a matter that you can't eat everything, but you just have to eat it in smaller portions. So average blood sugar for your A1C, if your blood sugar, as I said, is like 6% A1C and 120, 125, it's good. Once it starts to get into like 9, 10% A1C and over 180, that's not good at all. You don't want that. Why is salt a part, although it's not, it's sugar that makes your blood sugar goes high, but we watch the sodium intake also. There's a relationship between high blood pressure and diabetes. If you notice, most people who are except the type 1s, they're the ones who started from kids most of the time. They know their diet, they know how to control, because they have been doing it a lot. Seniors who develop a type 1, it's more difficult for them to get used to this. They now become insulin dependent. They are the ones more difficult to follow the diet. But the younger kids who started, from young with it, they know their bodies, they know how they feel. We don't have that much trouble with that. So a simple thing, healthy eating can beat diabetes. You eat too much, you're going to have a problem. You drink too much, even from juices and things like that, you're going to have too much your blood sugar would be high. No portion sizes. 4 ounces of juice. If you must drink juice, it should be 4 ounces. And that doesn't go only for diabetics. If most of us eat like diabetics, we nutritionists always say that, we wouldn't have a job. If everybody eat like diabetics, they'll be so healthy because they will not be exceeding sugary portions. They will eat their vegetables, they would watch their sodium, but we don't. And so we have to eat smaller servings, plan a healthy breakfast every day if you're diabetic. You've got to eat a very healthy breakfast because all night you were fasting. That's why what we take in the morning is called a fasting blood sugar. If you're diabetic, the first thing you do when you get up, you check your blood sugar. We call that fasting blood sugar because you haven't eaten all night. Then you have what we call postprandial, that is after a meal. We check again to see how your body is working with that. Many times, a lot of people, their blood sugars are high is because they're not drinking adequate amount of fluids. So that is something we have to look at also. You've got to have adequate amount of fluids. The other thing with diabetes, you understand what is carbohydrates, what is fats, and what is protein. Protein does not send up your blood sugar, but you need to look at the types of protein. You need some protein in the diet when you're diabetic. Protein is fine, but don't exceed the protein intake and then get your cholesterol to be high. Use good quality protein. Another question we get, could we eat eggs if you're diabetic? Sure, you could eat eggs if you're diabetic. So the thing is, know if you're at risk for developing diabetes. The pre-diabetic warning can be characterized by low blood sugar, you're feeling fatigued, you're feeling weak, you are tired all the time. That is a sign. See your doctor. Refined carbohydrates are not what you want. What we mean by refined carbohydrates, they're starchy foods, but they don't have any fiber in there, and they have a lot of sugar. When you eat these foods, what happens? You start to become, your blood sugar is so distorted that you become, dizzy, you feel tired easily, you're anxious, you're irritable, you're always hungry. Anytime you see these signs, watch blood sugar, have your blood sugar checked. When you repeat this process day in and day out, that's not good at all. So cut out what we call empty calories. Eat healthy. Eat healthy, you can live for years with diabetes. But if you don't intend to eat healthy, because that's one of the illnesses that works directly with what we eat. And that is why the type 1s, the young people who got diabetes at a very young age, we always say they know their diets because they have experienced what happens. And they know if they eat too much sugar, if they eat too much bread. So they are able to control their diet much more. But when they get into adulthood, that is sometimes when, they do things, take all these empty calories, too much rice, too much potatoes. Now, keep in mind, it doesn't mean you cannot eat rice. As I said before, switch to brown rice because the white rice is processed. So it's going to break down faster into sugar. The brown rice is healthier. It has more fiber. You could have potatoes, but it's one small potato. If it's large, it's half the potato. So it's not that you can't eat most, even sweet potato. You can have a piece of sweet potato. Diabetics can eat most of the foods. It's just the amount. Your food should be, your plate should look like this. Quarter of the plate with your meats because you don't want your cholesterol to go high and problems with your heart. Then other quarter, you have whether it's rice or potatoes or pasta or green bananas, whatever starch you like, it's just not a lot. If it's bananas, if it's a large banana, it's half. You cannot have more than that. Smoothies. Smoothies are healthy, but that's one place where I find diabetics tend to put excessive amount of fruits when they are making the smoothies. And after drinking it, what happens? Their blood sugar escalates. So you still have to watch the amount of fruits, although it's healthy because it breaks down into glucose and fructose, two starches. It's going to break down into that. So you want to watch that. Also, if you're diabetic, you want to be careful with hypoglycemia, that is staying too long to eat and having, the long space you stay to eat, the blood sugar drops. And so that's not good at all. Timely eating is important. You got to eat on time. The downstream effects of bad eating is sometimes you get this scary feeling because you would be okay, then your blood pressure starts rising, you go to the doctor, your HDL is high, and so that's not good. And as people get older, if you don't control your blood sugar, it could lead to dementia. Simple as that, because all these problems, the blood sugar rising, it's a common thing as people age. Blood sugar not controlled for many years. The HDL, which is the good cholesterol, is low and the bad cholesterol is high. That's not good. Your triglycerides is another thing we check also. That's the amount of sugar. So if you could control all these things, which are, to me, all of us should be controlling that, to be honest. You want to stop that cycle. You can start today. You don't need a pill to stop, telling you how to deal with your hypoglycemia, hyper. Start with the food. Cut down on the white flour, the sugar, the corn syrup. Replace all these empty calories with nutrient-packed whole grains, vegetables, healthy fats. That's what you need in your diet. So it's a diet which we all, I think, should be following because it's healthy, it's not excessive sugar. You're going to have good portions. You have a lot of vegetables on your plate. You have a certain amount of meat. You don't have excessive amounts of rice and potatoes and starches. So the diabetic diet is similar to a diet that we will recommend for somebody who wants to lose weight. So that is another way to look at it. You can have nuts. We want you to eat nuts because it has fiber and it has protein and it has the good healthy fats. All the foods you can have on the diabetic diet. It's just the ones that's going to break down into sugar. You want to watch those portion size, especially if you were diagnosed with pre-diabetes. Right there, you can stop it. But once it becomes full-blown and you're full-blown diabetic, then you've got to take your medication, whether it's insulin or if you're going to take oral hypoglycemic medications, like the pill, or then that you're going to have to take that and watch what you eat. The goal is when you go to the doctor, they don't have to increase medication because you are making healthy food choices. All should have a list. If you're diabetic, you should have the list of all the foods that's going to raise your blood sugar. And it's easy. The breads, all the starchy foods, the potatoes, the cakes, the cookies. It doesn't mean you could never eat a piece of cake or have some cookies. You could. You just have to work it in the diet. If you know you want to have dessert, just don't eat too much of the rice at dinner. You have a smaller portion of rice and you have a little dessert because people got to enjoy their lives also. You could control it. It's not one of the illnesses where it's when you go in excess. That's when the blood sugar rises. As it rises, the side effects. Uncontrolled diabetes for many years, that's not good at all. Night blindness, as I said before, the legs, the kidney, the heart, and everything goes out of that. So I will stop now and I will see if anyone has any questions.
Hi, Claudia. Yes, we have 3 questions, and I saw that Paulina had her hand raised before. So let's read the first question.
I see something about these.
It was Lillian that asked the first question. I'm looking for it. Yes, she wants to know if it's healthy to have food labeled sugar-free in their containers.
Okay. Sugar-free means they didn't add extra sugar in the process, which is good. You could have sugar-free. But if the product you're eating is made out of like flour or anything that's going to break down into glucose, you can have it. But you still cannot say because they didn't, it says sugar-free, you will have a lot. You still have to watch the portion size. You will probably be able to have a little more than if the food had a lot of sugar in it because the sugar was removed, but it still has carbohydrate. You see, glucose is from carbohydrates like flour, anything made with, flour, like the breads, the cake. So this is a good question because many times, sometimes people say sugar-free, ice cream is sugar-free, and they eat a whole lot of it. You still got to watch it. It's a healthier choice if you're diabetic to have the sugar-free products rather than, but you still got to be cautious. You don't want to have excessive amounts of it. Okay.
Yeah, we have a few more questions. One is from Gail. He or she wants to know how many carbs and sugars should you have a day?
Okay, it all depends. Let us say most times we put people on, if you're maybe very overweight, or we will say a 1500, but normally we say a 1800 calorie diet, which is good. If you, especially if you're moving around, you can function on an 1800 calorie. So 1800 calorie at breakfast, you're allowed 2 servings from the bread group. You can have a slice of bread and maybe a half a cup of, whether it's oatmeal or some cereal. Or if you don't want the bread, you can have a cup of the oatmeal and no bread, or you have 2 slices of bread and no oatmeal. The egg, if you're going to eat, if you're going to have an egg with it or cheese, that's not counted. Those are protein foods. They will not break down into starches. So you can have, your bread. It's a nice diet. You have 2 slices of bread at breakfast. You have whether it's an egg. If you want to have a little unsalted margarine, like a teaspoon of that, or then you have, where I would cut out is the juice. You don't need that juice. That juice is going to break down quickly. You can have a fruit, maybe half of an orange you can have there, or maybe a small slice of cantaloupe you have at breakfast with the 2 slices of bread, your egg, whether it's margarine, you don't want bread, you want to have cereal, whether it's oatmeal or, we do not want foods like cornflakes. They are processed. You want foods that when you eat them, the body has to work to break it down. By doing that, it's burning, excess calories. It's healthier. That is why we go with the brand products, the whole grains. When it's processed, so cornflakes should not be in a diabetic diet. It's too processed. Go with one of the cereals that says high fiber. Or if you have cornflakes, get like Fiber One or one of those and add a tablespoon to it, the high fiber cereals. Fiber is what is going to keep the blood sugar from rising. It like pulls it down instead of having that sugar rising all the way up. So that is your breakfast right there. That's the way, any one of us should be eating. Your cereal, a piece of fruit, that's breakfast. Lunchtime, if you're on insulin, you may need a snack between breakfast and lunch. What it means is just like 4 ounces of maybe a piece of fruit or something. I don't like the juices. Sometimes people take the juice. I always prefer that they use the fresh fruit and drink water because the fiber in there again will keep that blood sugar down. Lunchtime, you can have 3 ounces of chicken. You can have a small baked potato or maybe a half a cup of whole wheat or whole grain pasta and a salad or your cooked vegetables. It's like a basic diet. You want to have I would prefer that they keep the bread out there at that second meal. If you think you must have bread with your meal, then you have half a slice, little margarine or some olive oil, which is even healthier. It's a healthier fat, and that's it. If you're on insulin again between lunch and dinner, you may need like a snack there, which we'd call like a 3 p.m. or 2:30 snack, because by that time the insulin, you want to make sure the insulin stays constant there. It doesn't drop and you have nothing, So if you're not on insulin, The next meal could be dinner, or in between you have again maybe a piece of fruit. Then dinner you have 3 ounces of whether it's fish. You can have 2 vegetables if you want, or you can have, again, I could say maybe you want a piece of plantains, or you want a piece of green banana, as I said. All these foods can fit. It's the amount that you eat of those foods. Because when you chew them, that turns into sugar, into glucose. We use the term sugar loosely. The correct term is really glucose. And that sends up your blood sugar. So it's a basic diet. We, as I said, we all used to say if everybody eats like a diabetic, we would be a very healthy nation because we would not be taking in excessive amounts of sugar, which is the problem. Our diets are high in sugar. And it's not only for diabetes, it affects the eyes, it affects our cholesterol. Excessive amounts of sugar is not good also. So that's one of the problems we have there. And if diabetics, in addition to their diet, they're taking in all these extra foods, which is again increasing the sugar level in their blood, that is what happens. They don't want to go on insulin. That's the key thing. If you could stay on the oral medication before going on insulin, that's fine. But you've got to control it. If it's not being controlled, the doctors have no choice. They're going to put you on insulin. The only people who, as I said, is nothing they can do. They must take the insulin. They were born that way. They're type 1s. Their body never made that insulin. But all of us, every one of us, insulin, we eat, insulin shoots out from the pancreas, takes our sugar in, takes it back in, be good. Diabetics don't have that good process where the sugar leaves the pancreas is able to shoot out insulin to match the amount of sugar they're eating. Therefore, they have to take medication to help. We call it oral hypoglycemics, oral medication to bring down the blood sugar. So that's the thing with diabetics.
Claudia, we have another question. Somebody wants to know if shrimp, it's good.
If what is good?
Shrimp.
Shrimp. Okay, shrimp. I seem to be getting people really want this question about shrimp. Today I did a class and they asked about shrimp also. This is with shrimp. Okay, shrimp has nothing to do in terms of blood sugar. It's a protein food. So if you eat shrimp, it wouldn't send up your blood sugar. Where we look at shrimp, excessive amounts of shrimp can raise your cholesterol. If you have a heart problem, it's not that you can't eat it, but the cholesterol content in shrimp is a little higher. So therefore, you got to stay with, I think, 6 or 7 shrimp. Don't eat excessive amounts because of the cholesterol. It's not the sugar now. It's all the meats have nothing to do with diabetes. They affect cholesterol and the heart. And once you are diabetic, for some reason, those 3 things tend to work, especially in adults: high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol. Once you have one, you got to start taking care of all. The only people I say are the young people. When they get it young, like type 1, somehow they are able, if based on how they watch their weight and their diet, you find they could probably get away with a little more of the foods that are a little higher in cholesterol. But overall, they too have to be careful. As they get older, when they are young, they are playing, it's okay. We have basketball players who are type 1. You see, they just have to make sure that they eat to match the amount of energy that they're expending on the court. It's that's the thing.
Claudia, we have a lot of questions for you. Somebody said they are 66 years old. They had been diagnosed with pre-diabetes. This person has tried to substitute sugar, but seems to always go back. So this person wants to know, what can they do about salt?
So eat about salt?
Salt, I'm sorry, it was salt. My bad.
Oh, but she's pre-diabetic.
Yes.
And she used sugar substitute.
She tried, from what I'm reading.
Okay. We are trying now to get people not to use too much sugar substitutes. We are looking at the long-term effect with cancer. That's one of the things. But salt doesn't affect the blood sugar. What salt does, for some reason, when people are diabetic, there seems to be a little intermingling with the blood pressure getting high after a while. So that's where we want you to start watching your sodium, your salt, because in case the blood pressure goes high, you know, we just don't want excessive amount of salt in the system. Again, it's your taste buds. You have to start using more herbs and spices. So you're flavoring your food now and cutting down on the salt. That's what you want. Flavoring your food. And believe me, uncontrolled diabetes is not a good thing, because for many years you can have it. I've seen the havoc it have in family members, not controlling it over the years, and as they get older, again, vision loss and things like that. So fortunately now, people, they have medications, but it's the one thing, all the medications you can take, but you got to watch what you eat. It's food. When you eat the food, it's processed, it goes to the cells, turns that sugar there. It's going to shoot up. The doctor, what are they going to do? Keep increasing the dosages all the time because you're not controlling it with the foods you eat? No. And there are people who control it for years. They're in their 70s, and I've had patients tell me, they're in the 80s. They said, I've had diabetes a long time, but I always watch what I eat. Sometimes you want to eat some ice cream. You can have it, a little ice cream. But then you wouldn't eat the ice cream and the cake and the bread and the potatoes in one meal. Just watch it.
Claudia, so we have lots and lots of questions, but we have to keep moving. I'm gonna ask this question. Some people want to know if you recommend a good cookbook for diabetes.
They do have diabetic cookbooks. Right off, I cannot, but if I find out, I can email to you and you can make it available to them. But there are cookbooks, changing all the time for diabetics. Yeah. Probably have one somewhere.
For those of you that we didn't get to answer your questions, please take our number down and you can call us and we can send those questions to Claudia and she can answer those questions for you.
I'll do that. Yeah.
Yes.
Diabetes is something I'm passionate about since, as I say, it runs in members of my family. I'm always eager to help in that respect.